Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortnaster, and welcome to a new reaction. And this is by Jacob Geller, and this is Indiana Jones and the Objective Existence of God. Yeah, so I can, I'm going to kind of use my big brain here to try to figure out what this video is going to be about. But I'm going to say that it's going to be about, all the times that it's been kind of proved that either God, or at least something that we believe is God, is actually real in, the Indiana Jones franchise. I mean, literally, the first and third movie, like, the first one, that was for not the Holy Grail, that was for the Ark of the Covenant, and there was something in it that killed all the Nazis, and then in the third one, The Last Crusade, that was, the Holy Grail, which actually did work, and, like, it killed the villain of the movie, I'm forgetting what his name is now, but it also saved Indiana Jones' dad. And then, I mean, if you want to count it as canon, which I'm not exactly sure if it is counted as canon, but the newest Indiana Jones game, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, I mean, that one's, spoilers if you haven't played the game or seen any walkthroughs or playthroughs or anything, but it turns out that the Great Circle was a bunch of stones used to teleport Noah's Ark, which still exists. So, a lot of things involving Christian imagery or Christian mythos, is real and has actual powers. So something like that kind of does point towards, oh yeah, there is, an actual God with the capital G. So, honestly, I mean, I've never heard of Jacob Geller. This is one of those videos that I decided to watch purely based off of the title alone. And I mean, gonna have to see, because honestly, this sounds like it might be a good time. So, yeah, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video, link to my Let's Play of the day. And if you like this video or any other video that I make, I'd very much appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to my channel, because my main goal for this year is to hopefully hit 5,000 subscribers. And you know how it works, the majority of people who watch my content aren't actually subscribed to me, and I'd very much like that to change even just a little bit. Honestly, all of you people that do subscribe to my videos, you're making a childhood dream come true, and I thank you for it, even if it is just that little thing. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
I'm gonna ask a question here, and I need y'all to stay with me. Should Indiana Jones dedicate his life to Christ? This is not a question I ask lightly. In fact, it is not a question I've ever asked of anyone before. I am a Jewish man, as is Steven Spielberg, the director of the Indiana Jones films, and even Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones himself, is a quarter Jewish.
Not too shabby.
But still, I've been rolling around with this question in my head for months. Should Indiana Jones dedicate his life to Christ? Because here's the thing. I am Jewish, but if I walked into a room and found a 700-year-old man guarding a cup that Jesus drank from, and if I watched with my own eyes water from that same cup heal a gunshot wound, I would have to reconsider my belief system. I would think to myself, I have to become a monk, or a priest, or an evangelist, or something, right? Because if the power of Christ can actually keep a dude alive for 700 years and heal a gunshot wound right in front of me, then I should probably start following this book a little more closely. But that is not how Indiana Jones reacts. He has his brief encounter with the power of Christ, and then moves on, and seems to live his life exactly the same way he did before.
Jeez, okay, already I'm thinking, so, I mean, of course, Steven Spielberg, of course, I've never really put that much thought into it, but yeah, Steven Spielberg is Jewish, so, and yeah, Indiana Jones, he does this kind of, like, brush off, like, having experiences with actual proof of, the existence of God, and just kind of, like, wipe his hands off and then move on to the next thing, which, I mean, given his experiences in the second movie with, that other cult, the seemingly giving you the ability to rip the still beating heart out of another human being without them dying immediately from it. Yeah, maybe it's just the fact that Indiana Jones is, like, runs into the sort of thing so often that he's just completely numb to it, no matter like what religion or cult or sect the original magic artifact actually comes from.
In fact, the most acknowledgement he gives to this extraordinary experience is a line in the latest film in the franchise, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
God, yeah, I completely forgot about that one. Which, you know, it was actually one that I actually went to see with my family. Again, really weird, but literally Indiana Jones travels through time. So let's see. Multiple encounters with either magic or holy powers, time travel, teleportation, if you want to count the games. God, yeah. At this point, I'm very much leaning towards the side of things that, you know, Indiana Jones, by the end of, not even by the end of his career, by the midpoint of his career, he's just so burnt out on all of this mumbo jumbo stuff that he just doesn't care anymore. It just, in his eyes, it belongs in the museum, and that's it.
And it's a line that kind of drives me crazy. He says,
"But a few times in my life, I've seen things I can't explain. And I've come to believe it's not so much what you believe, as how hard you believe it."
This makes sense as something I might say to settle an argument between different religious sects. It does not make sense as something an archaeologist who's seen Jesus stitch up a bullet hole would say. It's not so much what you believe, Indy. You're an archaeologist. You should believe in the things you have evidence for. And by the way, the Holy Grail isn't even the first time you've seen proof of God. 2 years before that magic cup, you saw a bunch of angels burst forth from the Ark of the Covenant, and a year before that, you only survived to fight because of help from Shiva the Destroyer. Look, it's very easy for me to be critical.
I forgot that was
I don't think I've
seen
seen objective.
It's been a while since I've watched the movies.
Even once. But Indiana Jones didn't seem to change his belief system upon encountering the divine the first time, or the second time, or the third, or the fourth, and for some reason, I just can't stop thinking about it. Does Indy even care that God exists? What should he have done? What would any of us do?
Okay, so now thinking about it, actually, I'm sorry, it's like I'm not even 3 minutes into the video yet. I'm pausing a lot in this. I am sorry. But there was something I just remembered. Again, I haven't actually played The Great Circle myself, but I have watched a couple of playthroughs of it, because honestly, the game does look good. I'm just kind of waiting for it to go on sale. But thinking about it, God, the villain Nazi, what's his name? You know, that he's a villain Nazi, that's all he is. But he specifically kind of says that, you know, the owner or the creator of the Ark and who was given the stones that allow it to teleport may have not actually been called Noah. That was just the name that he was remembered by. And the little bit I do know of, and you know, of archaeology and prehistory and stuff like that, is that a lot of myths, a lot of ancient cultures had great flood stories in them. It's not just, you know, the Old Testament and Judaism and Christianity and stuff like that. So that does kind of point towards, like, again, the whole thing. It's like, oh, it's not definitively God. It's something possibly related to God, or that we believe is God, but not quite God itself. Again, now that I say it out loud, I'm just being very pedantic. I'm sorry.
Let's run down the evidence first, to try to establish at least a basic framework for the makeup of deities in Indiana Jones's world. This will include discussion of late plot points from many Indiana Jones things, including the recent game Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, so heads up if you don't want to be spoiled on that. The first time we meet Indiana Jones, he's raiding a lost Ark. The Ark, he explains, is the Ark of the Covenant, what the ancient Hebrews used to carry around the Ten Commandments. The Ark itself has been hidden for such a long time because a pharaoh stole it and took it to the city of Tanis, and then God buried the whole city under a sandstorm as punishment. Brody says,
"An army which carries the Ark before it is invincible."
Indiana does manage to find the Ark, only to have it stolen by the Nazis, who take it to a special island, crack it open, and get exactly what's coming to them. Indy and his companion
Honestly, again, like, we need more practical effects in movies. Those face melting scenes are just absolutely gruesome.
Marion close their eyes as a number of angels or God or something flies around, zaps every fascist in sight, ascends into heaven maybe, and then slams the Ark back closed.
And also, that's one of those things, like, thinking back, I never really thought about what those things coming out of the Ark actually were. Like, I always assumed that, like, they were like damned souls or something. But the idea that they could potentially be angels or something like that, I like that. I'm gonna use that.
This is the last time we see the Ark, because almost immediately the US government locks it in a box and wheels it into a big ol' warehouse. The next time Indy encounters something inexplicably divine is in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which is actually chronologically before Raiders of the Lost Ark. In Temple of Doom, Indy crash lands in India and finds out that a local village has had their Sankara stone taken from them and has subsequently undergone drought, famine, and a bunch of other bad stuff. The Sankara stones, Indy explains, were stones given to a priest named Sankara directly by the god Shiva. Within the movie, we see numerous inexplicable, seemingly religiously powered phenomena. The stones themselves can glow, burn, and maybe protect a village. Voodoo dolls are real and effective. A priest of the goddess Kali Ma can reach into someone's chest and pluck out their heart without killing them. A special liquid can turn rebellious humans into possessed slaves. And at the
which Indy was one of them.
end, Indy achieves victory over the evil priest Mola Ram by yelling, "You betrayed Shiva! You betrayed Shiva!" which seems to divinely activate the Sankara stone. The stone burns Mola Ram, Indy wins, returns the stone to the village, kisses Kate Capshaw, the end.
Which, just thinking about it, those other two stones had to have come from somewhere, right? So if they came from other villages that potentially had them stolen and they just fell into the river, presumably to never be found again, like, what happened to them?
Later, in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Indy goes on the quest for the Holy Grail, the legendary cup that Jesus Christ drank out of during the Last Supper, and subsequently Joseph of Arimathea used to catch Christ's blood during the crucifixion. This endows the cup with divine significance and power. In the Last Crusade, Indiana Jones's dad has been trying to find the Grail for his whole life, a quest Indy views as largely foolish. But they do find the Grail, guarded by an honest-to-God living 700-year-old knight. And as a bonus reward, the liquid inside the cup is truly endowed with divine power, fully healing Indiana's dad from a bullet wound to the gut. Unfortunately, a dumb Nazi tries to steal the Grail, there's a big earthquake, and it falls into the depths of the earth, never to be seen again. Finally, in the video game Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, Indy is back on the road, determined to uncover the mystery of the Great Circle.
If you were to draw a line through these ancient sites around the globe, you get a perfectly aligned circle.
Over the course of his globe-trotting adventure, he discovers that all these different important sites conceal the same ancient artifacts, each of which is written in Adamic, as in the very first language, the language God gave to Adam before the whole Tower of Babel hubbub. All of the artifacts eventually lead him and the Nazis to Iraq, where they uncover a different Ark, not a box this time,
the boat,
but a boat. It's Noah's Ark. The head Nazi, Voss.
Also, I don't know how many times I've watched that cutscene where where you have the Ark pulled out of the cave by, like, what was it, 4 or 8 steam locomotives. I love the visual of that.
Thinks that he can use the Ark along with all the ancient artifacts they've found to harness the power of God and win the war. Indiana warns Voss that Noah's feats aren't reproducible. After all, Noah was chosen by God, but Voss ignores him and uses the artifacts of the Great Circle in an Adamic incantation. This promptly summons a short-lived flood, and the Nazi manages to disintegrate himself as the Ark teleports to Antarctica. These make up Indiana Jones's big encounters with God. There are 2 more movies, of course, but these deal with aliens and Archimedes rather than deities.
Well, I mean, okay, if you want to be really specific, they weren't really alien. Well, I mean, they were aliens, but they weren't from outer space. They were from another dimension. Which, I mean, pedantic, sure, but you know.
There's also a whole extended universe of Indiana Jones media, books and comics and older games. If we include these, Indy has also met the Babylonian god Marduk, the great Aztec serpent Quetzalcoatl, the Greek god Hecate, and many others. In fact, the Great Circle wasn't even the first time Noah's Ark came into play. In the book Indiana Jones and the Genesis Deluge, he finds the Ark in Turkey and actually has a vision of Noah himself, though I think this incident has been overruled in favor of the recent game.
Yeah.
But because it's cleaner, and maybe because I find it more compelling, I want to boil our discussion down to these 4 incidents, 4 moments in which he witnesses proof of God over the span of as many years. Jones never starts these stories looking for God. At the start of each quest, he is always unconvinced by the mythic power of his quarries, and this makes sense, because Indy is not a religious missionary. He's an archaeologist and a historian, and it is this background that defines how he approaches these phenomena. As Indy knows, religious histories include facts that even the staunchest atheists must acknowledge. For instance, Jesus Christ was a real person, whether or not he was the Son of God. So, with that in mind, what is the archaeological history that contextualizes each encounter with the divine? Indiana Jones' position on all this is perfectly set up early in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He already knows all about religious artifacts. Whether or not they actually prove the existence of God, items like the Ark of the Covenant are monumentally important to history. He's annoyed he even has to explain this.
Yeah, the Ark of the Covenant, the chest the Hebrews used to carry around the 10 Commandments. Yes, the actual 10 Commandments, the original stone tablets that Moses brought down out of Mount Horeb and smashed, if you believe in that sort of thing.
Actually, there was 15 originally, but we don't talk about that other one.
Jehovah has given unto you these 15 10 commandments.
Either you guys ever go to Sunday school?
Now, Indy couches this explanation in a characteristically aloof, if you believe that sort of thing. But already, his perspective on history isn't as religiously agnostic as it might seem. All his background information on the Ark is based specifically on the Book of Exodus. Exodus is where we get the physical description of the Ark itself, what kind of wood to make it out of, how many cubits, its gold overlay, etc. But Exodus is also where we get the more historically significant details of the story. It tells us about the people who built the Ark, the reasons they carried it, and the locations they brought it to. The way Indy tells it, these elements are the generally agreed upon parts of the story. It's only when we get to the power of God sections that he starts rolling his eyes.
I don't believe in magic, a lot of superstitious hocus pocus. I'm going after a find of incredible historical significance. You're talking about the boogeyman.
But his apparent belief that you can simply take God out of the Book of Exodus to get an otherwise reliable text is... well, it's not quite the judgment a historically informed archaeologist should make. Outside of the words of the Old Testament itself, you are not going to find a lot of evidence of ancient Jews being enslaved in Egypt, or people wandering the desert for generations, or even the existence of an individual guy named Moses.
Oh God, what was it? I'm forgetting the channel. If I remember it, I'll put the name down in the video. But he... Useful Charts, that's it. Useful Charts, it's a YouTube channel where they go over history, like following family trees and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And he's done for lack of a better term, a family tree of, like, religious denominations and stuff like that. And as he's talked about, he's also talked about, like, the history and decision-making process of, like, this leads to this and this leads to that and stuff like that. And you look at it and one of the things was that, like, a lot of people, like, if I'm going to be completely honest here, I'm not the most religious person in the world. Like, I don't go to church every Sunday. I don't pray before bed, you know, that sort of stuff. I do believe in God, you know, spiritually. I don't know if there's, like, specific wordings of it, but so I'm not like an atheist or anything. But he's talked about how, like, a lot of atheists, when they, like, try to discourage the Bible or stuff like that, they'll say that the Old Testament was written by a bunch of, like, Bronze Age sheep herders and stuff like that. And and when in reality they were actually, Iron Age city dwellers that wrote the Old Testament and the rest of the books in the Jewish Torah. And why is that important? Because you have to actually look at the historical context of, when these books were actually written. Like, just looking at the New Testament of the Bible, like the actual Bible that we have today wasn't codified until several hundred years after, Jesus' death. And before then, there were many books floating around. I mean, one of the most famous ones was the Book of Judas that wasn't, selected to be in the Bible and wasn't thought to be, actually real or anything. I think there was also the Gospel of Mary Magdalene or something like that. Again, when you have stories that were passed around by word of mouth, you get a lot of variation.
Which doesn't mean Indiana shouldn't look for the Ark, but it does mean that even without a belief in superstitious hocus pocus, Indy is already demonstrating quite a bit of faith. Faith in the veracity of the book of Exodus. The fact that he does find the Ark, and it looks exactly as described in the Old Testament, already swings history way in favor of the Bible. The fact that God then pops out of the Ark is almost just icing on the cake. When it comes to verifiable history, though, the Bible looks like a peer-reviewed academic paper when compared with what Jones has to go on when searching for the Holy Grail. Obviously, we've moved from Old to New Testament here. The Ark comes from wandering in the desert with Moses, the Grail comes from the adventures of Jesus Christ. But the Ark and the Grail don't exactly get the same weight in their respective books. See if you can spot the difference. Here's how Exodus describes the Ark. Have them make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. Overlay it with pure gold, make both inside and out, and overlay them with molding around. Cast 4 gold rings over it and fasten it carries 4 feet with 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other. Place the cover on top of the ark and put in the ark the tablets of the covenant law that I will give you.
Okay, so it's been a while since I've read anything from the New Testament, so I'm going to assume that they don't give anywhere near the amount of detail for, the Grail as they did the Ark.
And here's how Matthew describes the Holy Grail. Then he took a cup. It's pretty subtle. Did you catch it? The Holy Grail functionally does not exist as an object in the actual text of the New Testament. In fact, designation of this cup as the Holy Grail, as well as it containing the blood of Christ and having magical powers, doesn't come from the New Testament at all. None of that started until the 1300s, specifically from a poem by Robert de Boron. Boron borrowed the idea of the Grail from another poet, Chrétien de Troyes, who invented a special cup without a connection to Jesus, just so Percival of Arthur's Round Table would have something to quest for. Boron took the idea of the Grail and added its Jesus-related history. It was Boron that decided that Joseph of Arimathea caught the blood of Christ in the same cup as was used in the Last Supper, and Boron who decided that Joseph was then sustained by this cup while in jail. The Holy Grail, the stuff I'm describing, it's pure biblical fan fiction. And this fan fiction is what Indiana Jones's dad decided to spend his life pursuing. 50 Shades of Grey with BDSM swapped out for a cup of Jesus's blood. Indy's initial reaction to the Grail is, if anything, overly generous.
I've heard this bedtime story before.
The fact that they do find the Grail, with all its entailing divine powers, presents an especially strange question of historical proof. The Grail's existence wouldn't compel Indiana to believe in the Bible per se, because the Bible says nothing about the Grail. Instead, it seems to be proving that some medieval poets were actually history's greatest secret religious archaeologists, unearthing relics from the Son of God that even the Bible had forgotten about. But even the Holy Grail has a far more legitimate paper trail than the Sankara stones, the divine objects in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Yeah, I may not know that much about Hindu mythology, but I've never heard of anything of that like.
That's because the Sankara stones don't really exist outside the universe of Indiana Jones, at least not in any way close to the movie's depiction. Real-life archaeologist Danika Parekh says the Sankara stones are Shiva lingas, or representations of the Hindu god Shiva, and they're considered phallic because Shiva is a creator as well as a destroyer. They're fairly common in India. I've never heard anyone refer to them as sacred stones outside of this movie. They aren't mythical lost items of potentially great power, just pieces of Hindu iconography hastily retrofit to be the MacGuffin of the movie.
Oh, okay. So that, again, going back to Christianity, that's basically saying like, oh, just the cross. Ooh. Like just having any cross or anything would just be magic.
The group that steals the Sankara stones, a cult called the Thuggees, were real in as much as there was historically a group of people with that name, and they did maybe do things in the name of Kali. But it's hard to even pretend to talk about the historicity of Temple of Doom because the film's whole internal mythology reeks of such a lack of interest in its subject matter and an obviously racist disregard for its setting. The disinterest in finding a historically significant object for Indy to chase means that the surrounding supernatural elements don't have a clear explanation, divine or not. Does Mola Ram's ability to pluck a heart out of a chest actually come from Kali? Is the possessing liquid that the slaves of the Thuggees drink also directly given by a god? Inexplicably, Indiana Jones is also tortured via a voodoo doll in Temple of Doom, which is a practice completely unrelated to Hindu tradition. The perspective of Indiana Jones, the man, seems to parallel Indiana Jones, the franchise, when it comes to viewing the deities of Hinduism. Sure, they might be real, but not in a way that's worth thinking about. The most nuanced view of religion in Indiana Jones might come from the series' most recent entry, the 2024 video game Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. The discovery at the end of the journey is another object of immense significance to the Bible, Noah's Ark.
You found the Ark of the Covenant, yes, but I found Noah's Ark.
But Indy isn't so quick to tie it to one specific religious lineage. He says many cultures from across the world and history experienced their own great flood.
There's thousands to choose from. You have the classic from the Hebrew Bible, the Sumerian creation myth, the great flood of the Chinese Ganyu, the blood deluge of Ymir, and of course there's the numerous Greek myths.
This, I think, is the perspective of religion that makes most sense for Indiana Jones to have. Not a view that privileges one particular telling over all others, but a broad grasp of history that understands the shared origins of many different cultural stories. Noah's Ark doesn't have to be literally Noah's Ark, as in captained by a guy named Noah who gathered 2 of every animal, but simply a shorthand for a boat that helped humanity survive a great flood. Indiana could also easily believe that there was a flood and a boat that survived it without necessarily believing the flood had divine origins. Vast areas of land could have been wiped out by glacier melt from the previous ice age, for example. Some archaeologists theorize a single massive asteroid could have crashed into the Indian Ocean nearly 5,000 years ago and produced skyscraper-sized tsunamis.
Oh, there's another version I've heard, again, around the Ice Age, when I'm forgetting the actual name of it, but there was a time when, like, the Mediterranean was, like, was very drained, like the water level in it was really low and stuff like that because of, the ice melt and stuff like that. And if I remember correctly, as stuff started to melt, a giant lake started forming around like Hudson's Bay here in Canada, being blocked off by a giant ice dam. And they have and they have potential like proof from like the sediment records and stuff like that that there were settlements, and they have like archaeological remains underneath the Mediterranean now of settlements that were at the time on dry land, but were potentially suddenly flooded because suddenly one day this ice dam got weakened to the point where it separated from the bottom, and this massive like lake just flooded, raising ocean levels enough to flood the Mediterranean. And also, now that I'm thinking about, potentially probably could have also washed away Doggerland, now that I'm thinking about it.
Or, of course, it could have been God, which is ultimately the take that the Great Circle goes with. After all, the Nazi scientist Voss slots a bunch of rocks into a big wheel and speaks in an ancient tongue which almost immediately summons the waters of heaven. Other details of the plot also detract from the previously suggested cross-cultural version of history. The ancient stones are written in Adamic, the language God gave to Adam, which is a specifically Old Testament origin story, and as Voss preps these artifacts, Indiana hollers that only Noah would be capable of this feat.
Voss! You have to stop! Quiet! You don't know what you're doing!
Of course I do.
Noah was chosen by God!
You are not, and you're destroyed, yeah.
This is the point Indiana Jones reaches at the end of each story. The realization that, for all his archaeological knowledge and religious skepticism, only faith will actually save the day. He closes his eyes when the Ark opens, heals his father with the Holy Grail, fully believes the Noah story, and even properly acknowledges Shiva. It is, almost always, an awesome moment, all the rationality in the world crumbling as he and we witness something that cannot otherwise be explained. But the question remains,
is really cool.
What then? Each of these 4 stories culminates with the lesson that life cannot be explained purely rationally. But after these realizations, Indy still has to be in another movie, comic, or video game, and he still has to play the role of a rational, skeptical man. Is there any way to square this?
Again, you could say, what I said before, you might just be really tired about it at this point.
What should his life look like after after 4 momentary encounters with the Demiurge? In our world, no one has witnessed ghosts fly out of the Ark of the Covenant or healed a bullet wound by dousing it with Holy Grail water. But plenty of people still think they've experienced proof of God. Surviving a deadly experience, the birth or death of a loved one, acts of compassion or community, a sunrise, a specific burn pattern in their slice of toast. These may read to me as far less specific, far less objective than what Indiana Jones experienced, but to the people at the center of those stories, their glimpses of God are no less real. If you are predisposed to believe God influences everyday life, you will find proof everywhere. In the beauty of nature, or stories on the news, or any unlikely outcome to any event. As encapsulated by one of my all-time favorite old people on social media posts.
My sister-in-law died in a fire. Her Bible was beside her bed on a stand. Not a burn mark on the Bible. Awesome. Miracle from God.
Yes, because the Bible was more important than your sister. Yes. Okay.
If someone is predisposed to find these glimpses of God, each event will be filtered through their existing perspective on the world. If you were raised Christian, a near-death experience might reinforce your belief in the greatness of Christ, but it will not convince you of the existence of Shiva. On the other hand, if you are a staunch atheist, or even just someone who doesn't believe in a lot of superstitious hocus-pocus, these same events, which to some could be read as undeniable proof of God, will instead be read as a combination of coincidence and explainable scientific principles. And even if...
I'd very much love to see the explainable scientific principles that resulted in the Holy Grail water seemingly instantly healing a gunshot wound.
Even if a skeptic was presented with something they found truly inexplicable, an event that seemed to provide proof of some higher power, it is nearly impossible to imagine that event would come with a clear answer to which god did it and which religion got it right.
Yeah.
But that is, in essence, what Indiana Jones has been confronted with. This cup grants people eternal life, and it's specifically because it's the cup that Jesus drank from. This stone burns non-believers because this stone was a gift from Shiva. I mean, how are you supposed to apply religious philosophy to that? What questions could even be left? I guess I'm thinking about that line from Dial of Destiny again, the one that I said drives me crazy. I've come to believe it's not so much what you believe, it's how hard you believe it. To me, at first blush, this seemed like Indy denying the existence of truth. How could it not matter what you believe? But I think read a little more generously, the line becomes less about objective truth and more about which passions we allow to guide our understanding of the world. Throughout Indiana Jones's life, he's seen many apparitions of God from many different traditions. God, Jesus, Shiva, the aliens, Marduk, Hecate, Quetzalcoatl. What could possibly connect everything from this wide a swath of the supernatural? Well, each being, no matter its origin, has manifested exclusively through archaeological artifacts. In order for a god to melt a bunch of Nazis, heal his father, or free a bunch of kids from slavery, Indiana Jones has received proof that someone has to do the work of historical investigation and risk-taking and gosh darn archaeology. To Indiana Jones, whatever makes a god is inextricably linked to this pursuit. He doesn't need to change his life in reaction to the gods he's found. He's only found those gods because he's already dedicated himself and his life to a greater purpose. God appears to Indy like God appears to any believer. Proof through the things he finds most beautiful.
You know, I've never thought of it that way. Thinking about, like, going back to, like, the whole, like, Nazis trying to find, you know, artifacts and stuff like that. Like, Indiana Jones is searching for these artifacts for the love of history, for the love of rediscovering things. The Nazis are looking for, you know, whether it be the Holy Grail or, you know, the Ark of the Covenant, because of power. They're not doing it because they want to, you know, share them with the world and, you know, share rediscovered history or anything like that. They're sharing, they're trying to find them to conquer the world, to kill, to hurt, to harm, you know. So yeah, of course it would be Indy that would actually find them first, not the Nazis.
History illuminated. I do actually have more thoughts about God and Indiana Jones, much more unresolved ones. But first, let me just tell you what's happening on Nebula real quick. First off, I've got a new video up there. Inspired by Rasputin and ProZD, I recorded what was supposed to be a quick rundown of my most played games on Steam that turned into a rabbit hole of trying to calculate just how much of some games.
Honestly, a wonderful video there. Yeah, so I mean, that's a lot to think about, and it's funny how, again, like, I've watched the Indiana Jones movies a fair number of times. Granted, I haven't watched them in a while, but, like, I had never, again, really thought of that. Like, one, that, again, I, like, never even thought of, you know, the whole thing about how Indiana Jones wouldn't have, only ever finds, you know, these artifacts because he's looking for them for the sake of, you know, helping others, for learning and stuff like that. Always the little things like that. Honestly, I'm horrible at seeing little stuff. Honestly, I'm horrible at, like, thinking of little things like that. So, yeah, that's definitely going to be it for now. So, yeah, of course, as always, original videos linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day. And, yeah, with all that out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.